You have felt it before. You may not have had the language for it. You may not have been able to explain it even to yourself, but you have felt it. That moment when you walked into a room full of people talking, arguing, performing, competing for attention, filling every available space with sound and opinion and the desperate energy of people trying to be noticed, and in the corner, or at the edge, or sometimes right in the center of it all, there was one person who was doing none of these things. Not talking, not performing, not filling any space with anything. Just sitting there, present, watching, breathing, existing with a quality of stillness that was so complete, so genuine, so thoroughly at odds with the frantic energy of everyone else in the room that it created its own gravitational field. And you noticed them, not because they wanted you to, not because they did anything to draw your attention, but because your brain, that ancient, pattern-seeking, threat-detecting instrument that has been scanning environments for millions of years, identified something in that person that it could not ignore. Something unusual, something that did not fit the expected pattern. Something that, precisely because it was so still in an environment of constant motion, registered as significant, as important, as worthy of sustained attention and careful evaluation. And in that moment of noticing, something happened inside you. Something shifted. You did not feel sorry for them. You did not think they were shy or awkward or excluded. You felt something else entirely. Something closer to respect. Something closer to caution. Something close to the instinctive, pre-verbal, evolutionarily ancient recognition that the person you cannot predict is the person you need to pay the most attention to. That was power. Not the loud, visible, chest-beating power that most people associate with the word, but the quiet, invisible, almost gravitational power that operates below the threshold of conscious recognition, and that is, for precisely that reason, far more effective and far more durable than any power that announces itself. Let me dismantle a myth that has been sold to you since childhood. The myth that power belongs to the loudest voice in the room. That influence flows from the person who speaks the most, argues the most persuasively, dominates the most conversations, commands the most attention through the sheer force of their verbal output. This myth is everywhere. It is in the boardrooms where the most talkative person is assumed to be the most competent. It is in the classrooms where participation is graded and silence is penalized. It is in the social gatherings where the entertainer is crowned king and the quiet observer is dismissed as wallflower. It is in the media where the loudest commentators get the most airtime and the most thoughtful analysts are considered too boring for public consumption. This myth is so pervasive, so deeply embedded in the fabric of modern culture, that most people accept it as obvious truth without ever examining it, and because they accept it, they organize their behavior around it. They talk more to be taken more seriously. They share more opinions to appear more knowledgeable. They fill more silences to seem more confident. They perform more aggressively to command more respect. And the irony, the devastating, beautiful, perfectly poetic irony, is that every single one of these behaviors achieves the opposite of its intention. Every word spoken to demonstrate competence slightly diminishes the perception of competence. Every opinion shared to display knowledge slightly cheapens the perceived value of that knowledge. Every silence filled to project confidence slightly undermines the impression of genuine confidence. Every performance designed to command respect slightly erodes the respect it was designed to command. Not because the words are wrong or the opinions are uninformed or the confidence is fake, but because abundance devalues, always, in every domain. Without exception, what is freely and constantly available is never perceived as precious. What is rare and carefully dispensed is always perceived as significant. This is not a social convention. This is a law of human psychology as reliable and as universal as gravity. Seneca knew this. He observed the Roman social world with the eye of a man who understood human nature at its most fundamental level. And what he observed was that the people who talked the most were almost never the people who were most respected. The senators who gave the longest speeches were not the most influential. The philosophers who lectured the most were not the most wise. The socialites who entertained the most were not the most admired. The most respected, the most influential, the most wise, the most genuinely admired people were almost always the ones who spoke least, who observed most. who held their contributions until the moment was precisely right, and then delivered them with a precision and a weight that the constant talkers could never match. Seneca wrote about this pattern with a directness that leaves no room for misinterpretation. He said that the wise person does not pour out their words like water from an open faucet. They release them like medicine from a dropper, measured, deliberate, calculated for maximum effect, not because they are playing a game, not because they are manipulating the perception of their value, but because they genuinely understand that words are powerful, and that powerful things should not be used carelessly. That speech is a tool, and that tools should be deployed with precision rather than flung about indiscriminately. That every word you speak either adds to your authority or subtracts from it, and that most people, through the sheer volume of their speech, are subtracting constantly without realizing it. Now I want to take you somewhere that most discussions of this topic never go. I want to take you inside the mind of the silent person, because from the outside, the silent person looks simple, looks still, looks almost passive, but the inside is anything but passive. The inside of the genuinely powerful silent person is one of the most active, most engaged, most intensely alive mental environments you will ever encounter. Because the silent person is not sitting there doing nothing. They are doing everything. They are processing information at a level of depth and complexity that the talking person cannot access, because the talking person's cognitive resources are being consumed by the demands of speech production. The silent person is observing body language that the talkers are too busy performing to notice. They are detecting emotional undertones that the talkers are too self-absorbed to hear. They are identifying power dynamics that the talkers are too invested in to see clearly. They are mapping the social terrain of the room with a precision that would require the talkers to stop talking and start watching, which they cannot do because their identity and their sense of social safety depend on their continued verbal output. The silent person is, in military terms, conducting reconnaissance while everyone else is engaged in combat. They are gathering intelligence while everyone else is expending ammunition. They are building a comprehensive, nuanced, deeply informed understanding of the situation while everyone else is fighting over whose version of the situation will prevail. And when the time comes to act, when the moment arrives that requires genuine insight, genuine judgment, genuine understanding of what is actually happening beneath the surface noise of competing voices, the silent person is the one who has the information, the one who sees clearly, the one whose perception has not been distorted by the need to defend a position they staked out prematurely, the one who can move with precision while everyone else is swinging blindly. Marcus Aurelius exemplified this quality throughout his reign. Historical accounts describe him as a man who listened far more than he spoke in council meetings, who would sit through hours of debate and discussion, absorbing every perspective, evaluating every argument, reading every speaker's body language and emotional subtext before offering his own view. And when he did speak, the room went quiet, not because he commanded silence, not because he banged a fist on the table or raised his voice or used any of the theatrical techniques that lesser leaders employ to capture attention. The room went quiet because everyone in it knew, through repeated experience, that when Marcus spoke, what he said would be worth hearing, that his words would be precisely chosen, that his perspective would be informed by a depth of observation that no one else in the room could match, that his judgment would be grounded not in the superficial dynamics of the debate, but in the deep underlying reality of the situation that his silence had allowed him to perceive with extraordinary clarity. This is what genuine authority looks like. Not the performance of power through volume and dominance, but the expression of power through precision and depth. Not the seizure of attention through force, but the natural attraction of attention through the unmistakable quality of genuine insight. Not the demand for respect through position, but the earning of respect through the demonstrated capacity to see what others miss, to understand what others overlook, to grasp the essence of a situation while others are still arguing about its surface. I want to go deeper now into something that connects the power of silence to the deepest principles of Stoic philosophy, because the connection is not incidental. It is not a coincidence that the Stoics, who developed the most comprehensive philosophy of personal power ever articulated, also placed such extraordinary emphasis on the practice of silence. The connection is essential, structural, fundamental. Silence is not just a social tactic that happens to align with Stoic principles. Silence is a Stoic principle. It is one of the most important and most practically powerful applications of the Stoic understanding of what constitutes genuine human strength. And to understand why, you need to understand something about the Stoic concept of the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the commanding center of the human soul. The hegemonikon in Stoic psychology is the part of you that is capable of genuine choice, genuine judgment, genuine evaluation. It is the part that can observe your own impulses and decide whether to act on them. That can feel an emotion and choose how to respond to it. That can perceive a situation and form an independent assessment of it, rather than being automatically swept along by the crowd's assessment. The hegemonikon is in essence your genuine self, the part of you that is not reactive, not automatic, not determined by external forces, but genuinely, authentically, sovereignly yours. And the Stoics believed that the health of the hegemonikon, the strength of this ruling faculty, was the single most important determinant of the quality of a human life. More important than wealth, more important than health, more important than social status or political power or any external circumstance. Because the person with a strong hegemonikon can navigate any external circumstance with wisdom and dignity and genuine inner freedom. While the person with a weak hegemonikon is at the mercy of every external circumstance, every emotional provocation, every social pressure, every manipulative influence that the world can bring to bear, and silence strengthens the hegemonikon. Every time you choose silence over reactive speech, you are exercising your ruling faculty. You are demonstrating to yourself, through direct experience, that you have the power to choose your response rather than being controlled by your impulses. Every time you hold a reaction that wants to be expressed, you are strengthening the neural pathways associated with self-regulation and weakening the neural pathways associated with automatic reactivity. Every time you observe without commenting, listen without arguing, process without performing, you are building the specific cognitive and emotion muscles that the hegemonikon depends on. And over time, through the accumulated effect of thousands of these small exercises, the hegemonikon becomes stronger. Your capacity for genuine choice increases. Your resistance to manipulation grows. Your ability to see clearly in situations where others are blinded by their own reactivity improves. Your judgment becomes more reliable. Your responses become more precise. Your entire way of being in the world becomes more deliberate, more considered, more genuinely your own. This is not a social strategy. This is personal development at its most fundamental level. The development of the one faculty that determines everything else about the quality of your life. Epictetus taught his students that the first and most important step in philosophical development was learning to hold your tongue. Not because speech is inherently bad, but because the habit of automatic speech is the most visible and most accessible symptom of a deeper problem. The problem of automatic reactivity, the problem of being controlled by impulses rather than governing them. The problem of living from the outside in, letting external events determine your internal state, rather than living from the inside out, letting your internal principles determine your response to external events. When you talk automatically, you are reacting automatically. When you fill every silence with speech, you are filling every moment with reactivity. When you share every thought as soon as it arises, you are demonstrating that you have no gap between impulse and action, no space for genuine choice, no room for the ruling faculty to operate. And this absence of the gap, this collapse of the space between stimulus and response, is the defining feature of a person who is not free, who is not sovereign, who is not in command of themselves. And conversely, the cultivation of the gap, the deliberate, patient, persistent practice of creating space between what happens to you and how you respond, starting with the simple, accessible, immediately practicable discipline of not speaking every time you have an impulse to speak, is the beginning of genuine freedom, the beginning of genuine sovereignty, the beginning of the kind of genuine personal power that does not need to be announced because it is self-evident. That does not need to be performed because it is lived. That does not need to be claimed because it is demonstrated, moment by moment, through the unmistakable quality of a presence that is genuinely, deeply, authentically still. Now let me tell you about something that happens to the people around the silent person. That is perhaps the most remarkable and the most practically significant effect of all. The silent person, simply by being silent, changes the behavior of everyone else in the room, not through any action, not through any instruction, not through any form of explicit influence, but through the subtle, almost invisible mechanism of social comparison. When there is a silent person in the room, the talking people become self-conscious about their own talking. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, as the contrast between the silent person's composure and their own volubility becomes more apparent, they begin to question their own behavior. They begin to wonder whether they are talking too much, whether they are saying anything that actually needs to be said, whether the quality of their contribution is proportional to its quantity. And this self-consciousness, this subtle but real shift in the talking person's relationship with their own speech, changes the dynamic of the entire room. The conversation becomes more careful, more considered, more substantive, not because anyone instructed it to be, but because the presence of the silent person raised the implicit standard of what constitutes a contribution worth making. This is influence without action, power without assertion, leadership without command. It is the most efficient and the most elegant form of influence available to a human being, because it requires nothing from you except your own genuine composure. It asks nothing of others except what they ask of themselves in response to your presence. And it produces results that are more lasting and more genuine than any form of explicit influence could achieve, because the change comes from within the other person rather than being imposed from without. It is their own self-consciousness that drives the change, their own evaluation of their own behavior in the light of your example, their own decision, made freely and without coercion, to raise the standard of their own contribution. And changes that come from within are always more durable, more genuine, and more deeply integrated than changes that are imposed from without. Let me bring this to a place that I think ties everything together. The silent person in the room is not powerful because they are silent. They are powerful because their silence is a symptom of something deeper, a symptom of self-mastery, of genuine inner stability, of a relationship with their own mind that is so thorough and so genuine that they do not need the world to confirm their existence through the medium of speech. They are powerful because they have solved the problem that most people spend their entire lives failing to solve. The problem of needing external validation. The problem of requiring the attention and the acknowledgement and the response of others in order to feel real. The problem of using speech as a tool for managing their own anxiety rather than as a tool for genuine communication. The silent person has solved this problem not by suppressing their need for validation but by outgrowing it. Not by hiding their anxiety but by processing it. Not by performing confidence but by building it from the inside through the sustained practice of genuine self-knowledge and genuine self-regulation. And this solution, this genuine resolution of the fundamental problem that drives most human social behavior, is what people sense when they encounter the silent person. They do not sense a strategy. They do not sense a performance. They sense something much rarer and much more compelling. They sense a person who is complete, who is not using the interaction to get something they are missing, who is not performing for an audience to fill a void, who is present not because they need to be, but because they choose to be. And this completeness, this genuine, unforced, deeply earned self-sufficiency, is the most powerful thing a human being can bring into any room. More powerful than eloquence, more powerful than charisma, more powerful than any form of social skill or verbal ability, because it is the one thing that cannot be faked, cannot be performed, cannot be learned from a book or a course or a video, can only be built slowly and patiently and honestly through the lifelong practice of becoming genuinely, completely, unapologetically yourself, in silence, in stillness, in the quiet, powerful, magnificently human act of being fully present without needing to prove it to anyone. The next time you walk into a room, try something. Do not announce yourself. Do not compete for attention. Do not fill the silence with your voice. Just be there, fully, completely, with your attention directed outward rather than inward, with your energy focused on understanding rather than being understood, with your presence offered as a gift rather than deployed as a tool. And then watch what happens. Watch how the room responds to your stillness. Watch how the dynamics shift around your composure. Watch how the people who were performing begin to question their performance. Watch how the conversations that were shallow begin to deepen. Watch how the attention that you did not seek begins to flow toward you anyway, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Through the oldest and the most reliable and the most powerful method available to any human being in any situation, the method of being genuinely, quietly, completely real. In a world of performers, the real person is always the most powerful person in the room. If this changed how you think about your own presence in the spaces you occupy, subscribe to this channel, because what we practice here is not social strategy. It is the art of becoming the kind of person whose presence speaks louder than any words ever could. And the world, drowning in noise as it is, needs that kind of presence more than it has ever needed anything. I will see you in the next one.